Here is a test to find whether your mission on Earth is finished. If you're alive, it isn't.
Hi, I'm delighted to welcome you to the first episode of Radio Transatlantic Calling, a podcast for anyone feeling suspended between survival and collapse. This isn't about individual survival anymore. We're here to tune into what's next for humanity, sensing into the static together, exploring questions that connect us, rediscovering who we are together, and building a kind of community of consciousness against the overwhelm. I'm Ray Edgar, your host for the show, coming to you from Europe.
This is our third place, not work, not home, a place to listen, reflect, and make meaning again. We're reaching across generations and across the Atlantic to find what connects us. And each episode will explore what else might be possible, listening for signals in the static. We met in a cafe in York just after the world reopened, and we realized something. The world hadn't gone back to normal. So we're here to explore what actually changed. I'm Catharine Allen, your co-host for the show, and I'm coming to you from North America. So Ray, I'm curious if you'd like to introduce yourself, but I'd also like to hear what made you choose this song for this episode.
Thank you, Catherine. So I'm Ray Edgar. I'm in the south of France. I have a long career of working in tech, in organisational change. These days, I feel like I'm in some sort of semi-retirement, but it's not the case. The world has pushed me into that place, unfortunately, as it has with a lot of people. And I feel instinctively that we need to talk about what's going on to move away from the separation that is progressively pushing us into individual survival and overwhelm. And I'm somebody who's experienced quite a considerable part of that myself over the years, and to bring a lot of people into that discussion, including the people who are listening now, of course. And the song. This is what the universe offered me. Burning Down the House by the Talking Heads. And David Byrne says in the song, hold tight until the party's over. I have a sense these days and everybody's holding tight, waiting for something to change. And this was the very first album I bought when I went to university in 1983. Listening to this, and I just didn't get it. I didn't know the half of where it was coming from, the jazz, the fusion, the funk, the whole thing that was going on. But I loved it. And sometimes I feel perhaps we're going to have to go a bit crazy and maybe even burn down the house to get to another place.
Very wisely chosen. Yes.
Before we continue, I'd like to say thank you to David Byrne and the Talking Heads. Please go to YouTube or similar apps and check out their work and help support their music. These are important cultural references that act as signposts and help us make sense of the life we all share. Thanks again to David and the Talking Heads. So, Catherine, we don't know anything about you. Tell us about yourself. Tell the listeners how you come to be here and more about this first episode.
Yes, thanks. So I'm Catharine Allen, and I'm an intuitive advisor, and I'm an author of 3 and now to be 4 books coming out in the fall. I've had a long career coaching people, but also as an astrologer and a psychic medium, although I'm reinventing myself. So part of the fire, again, is, you burn away something and something else is revealed. And I think a lot of people are going to be going through this. We have historical planetary shifts that we've been anticipating as astrologers, one being Pluto in Aquarius, which will last until 2044. And Aquarius is the sign of the brotherhood of man, but also like rebelling and dissolving old systems to build a new one versus tinkering constantly with the old one. They would rather knock down the building and build a new one than constantly renovate. But at the same time, it's like the dissolution of the Capricorn model of the king and the patriarch and the corporate, the top down. And that includes, even one news source or one person saying that they have full power over. And we're seeing that already. We're seeing factions and people don't know where to get their sources and their news. And so we're in the beginning of it. It's just started a very long cycle. Well, right now we have on the 20th, the historical shift of Neptune and Saturn conjunct at 0 degrees Aries for the first time in thousands of years. It's also coinciding with the Fire Horse year in the Chinese New Year and with an eclipse. So this is such a huge, it's almost hard to put words on, but like 0 degrees Aries is the birth of the zodiac. So when you think of every year as being a birthday, the sun comes back to where it was and you get a boost or you evaluate your life each year. This is the entire zodiac with these planets. The first time these are coming together in thousands of years. So the initiation or the birthing of something or the burning down of the old or of what is not working is quite extreme. And a fire horse is also, when you look at a horse in flames, think of how fast that's going to move and burn, which is great and also scary at the same time, right?
And what words for the listeners of the show? What words, what feelings does that evoke? If people were to recognize that where they are.
Yeah. Well, I've been feeling for a very long time that 2026 would be the big, the beginning of seeing an unrecognizable reconstruction of how we live. So, I know what I'm saying can sound really ominous and scary, but I've been feeling for a while, like, this nostalgia for the world that was and all of the movements and all of the different things that are trying to cling to a past version of life, whether that's gender binary stuff or corporate top-down models. It's just not, to me, it's not where we're going, and it can't last. And yet, of course, people are going to try to hang on for dear life to what they knew because it's scary to go through that much change. But there's another side of it that could be actually quite exciting because it's not like everything we lived was perfect. So, yeah.
So what I'm getting there is a lot of people have been and possibly still are in this feeling of collapse, of chaos, of trying to survive. But in fact, as is always the case, it's a tension. And on the other side of that, the other side of the coin, the other side of that tension is rebirth. And in fact, with 2026, with all of the things you mentioned there, my sense of it is very much that, unlike 24 and 25, coming out of COVID and having many issues in the world, 26, and I'm already having these conversations with people, seems to be bringing forward the changeover to what's possible now, moving out of a freeze into some action, into people actually talking about doing something and not being frozen by the things that have happened. What sense do you make?
Yeah. Well, the lessons of Aries, if we look at Saturn and Neptune, the lessons of Aries are about reclaiming, like having a strong sense of the self, having the capacity to initiate and to act, and a lot of the time Aries is like acting quickly. It's not overthinking and making a long-term plan. It's like, oh my God, that needs to be done. Well, they don't think, they'll just run into the burning building because it needs to be done. And so if we're coming into a time of like idealizing these Aries qualities, it's like the hero might figure very strongly who's heroic, who's dashing in to save the day or avenge certain things that have gone on, but then there's also a lot of like impulsive stupid that comes because they haven't thought it through. So it's just going to be, if you think of a horse on fire running through a building, like what's right? It could bust down the doors and let people escape, but it could also burn everything up inside if it like catches fire on the curtains. And we don't know which it'll be. We'll see all of the above, I would guess.
Now, for those of you who are listening thinking, oh, I wasn't expecting to tune into a show about astrology.
Yeah.
Just to let you know, this isn't a show about astrology, but at the same time, we're going to talk across generations, and it might surprise the listeners, but Generation Z are very much more positioned towards looking at astrology and other ways in which they connect with the universe. And that's very much one of the themes of the show, is much more about how we are part of something bigger and moving away from our ideas of individual survival and what it means to come back together. And so very naturally, especially given Catherine's expertise, and we're going to bring that into the show. And when if it's not now with the Yearof the Fire Horse and everything you described, Catharine, I don't know when it would have been a better time.
Yeah, because that's the beauty of astrology, is it's not about, oh, the planets are up there and they're doing things to us. No, these are archetypal themes that come up. We could discuss the same themes and not mention any planets, and we'd still have relevant discussion.
Well, one thing that you said there about just acting brought something to mind to me, which keeps recurring over the last few weeks. The philosophy of Camus, the French philosopher and novelist, was very much centered around the fact that we can think about what our experience might be in the future. We can have ideas about it, but it'll never be that. The future we create is the future we create by acting and then basing what we do on the results of those acts. And I feel drawn towards, if more people could perhaps see themselves acting as opposed to thinking, then that would be part of this overall move in 2026.
Yes, well, I think we're already, seeing a strong trend towards that. You look at the level of protest that's been going on just since the holidays, the mass mobilization that's taking place. That's, to me, that's, even though we're in difficult times, that's heartening, because as soon as when you see that people are not in shock and frozen, as we so much were especially during COVID years, and people are like sort of melting and ready to act, like that's a huge turning point for society. And for me, it's reassuring, because as long as people are not asleep at the wheel, more and more people act, more and more people speak out. It gives more people the permission, who are sitting there waiting in the wings scared, to do so or to join something as well. And then I just, the idealist in me likes to believe that somehow the good wins, as long as good people are acting and speaking.
It'd probably be good for the listeners or they may be already thinking, okay, well, how did these guys meet? What's this got to do with COVID, etc., etc.? Perhaps maybe if we go back.
My trip to England and Scotland. So I was in York, and I just loved it. And I was just taking a rest from exploring, and I was at a little cafe. Very nice place, very cozy, lots of wood, Felt like, yeah, I could sit here. I could meet people. I just felt like, yeah, if I lived here, I'd be here. And then you walked in with your daughter and sat near me, and we're both outgoing people. And here we are.
And from my point of view, that is my favourite coffee shop in York. And it's in an old street, hundreds of years old. As soon as you go in, you can talk to people. There's a very calm energy in there, not too loud, etc.
Yeah, it's intimate right away when you get, that feeling as soon as you walk in.
I was tapping into the energy that was there. But my daughter, who comes from a totally different world, was shocked afterwards when I said, well, of course I didn't know you at all. And I mean, for those listening, that was a bit of a shock to come from Canada, as it was then during COVID, to the UK.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it would have been. For me, the big revelation from going to the UK for that trip, it was really life-changing and on many levels. But one of them in relation to COVID was, in Quebec, not just a couple of months before, we had just come out of a 5 months lockdown and curfew in the middle of winter. So we were in one of the most oppressive lockdown situations of COVID. I look back and I'm like, it really took more guts than I realized to sort of travel after being in that mindset. And then I get to the UK and I get to London the beginning of or end of May, and no one's wearing a mask. And I said to somebody on the street, I said, oh, no one's wearing masks. And they just looked at me and said, well, I think we're just over it, just like so, matter of fact. And I was like, oh my God, what have we been doing here? Like, and it just was like, the UK was this reset because they had just refused to be scared. But, if you don't break out of your circumstances, get a different view, travel, something has to shift your perspective. Otherwise, you're just take what you're fed and you keep living it because your nervous system just keeps reinforcing it. I was just so happy to be over there and feeling normal again. And I was very anxious to meet new people.
But you gave me a little bookmark. Was it the end of 24 or early in 25? I don't remember exactly. But I happened to open that book because I was looking for something else, and this bookmark fell out, and I said, okay. So, things don't always happen in the time you expect them. I think I'm being nudged by the us to have a conversation, and so I contacted you. And for the listeners, I've become aware that, you said we were coming out of COVID, put it all behind us. But I've become increasingly aware after that whilst the masks have disappeared, something else has changed.
Yeah.
And we haven't put certain things behind us.
Oh, yeah, no.
It's almost like I read the other day that we're already arguing and having different opinions over what actually happened, and it was only 2 or 3 years ago. People are rewriting what happened, almost gaslighting people into believing something different happened. And for me, that's part of the story, which is, yes, something changed during COVID, and no, we haven't actually got over it. Until we can talk about it, until we can make sense of it, we're not going to move on. So part of the moving on is also for somebody who uses the phrase, excuse me, readers, composting that shit to take us forward.
Yeah, I think we're in I think people don't realize we're still in a collective PTSD from that period. So around that, 2022, maybe the world had been frozen and then we were coming out, but still a lot of things had survived. But I found it worse. The end of 22, 23, all the rents, everything started to inflate. And there was less and less public space and less people could afford to open cafes, restaurants. So there's been less chance to even talk to people or process it. So we weren't locked down, but we didn't have the same, at least over here, I didn't feel we had the same access. Mm-hmm. And now it's one of those weird things, right? Where when something happens, people will like be really intense and need to talk about it, maybe dramatic about it and gossip about it. But if you don't get a chance and time goes by, is it okay to bring it up that I am still grieving my ex from 5 years ago? Am I allowed to talk about, the loss of a cat or something because it happened? And I'm sure there's lots of people just like flooded with all kinds of things that happened during a difficult period and there was nowhere to share it. And then you're just all like pent up or numbed out or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting what's happening now with globally with mobilizing and people speaking again, because this is to me a good sign of like, it's the beginning of healing on many levels when you start to act and talk again and meet with people again. And I do see things opening up. Did you feel that sense too, where you are? Like,
I am getting a sense of that. The other thing that occurred to me while I was listening to you was, for me and for a lot of people, also being confined in spaces and having a lot of time.
Yeah.
We know, and when the world stopped, in a sense, all the travel, all the planes, all the, in India, people could see the Himalayas again from various cities. The world. Yeah. Suddenly there was this great respiration for a second where
the air quality
to nature. Yeah. But the thing is, during COVID, I hadn't realized how stressed I was by the beginning of it. And then once we got into lockdown, I started doing a whole load of courses on embodiment and embodied practices. And I started again with my meditation practices, etc., etc. Mm-hmm. Things I hadn't done for a few years. But I kind of realized that the reason I hadn't done them is because I was getting wound tighter and tighter and tighter by the system.
Yeah.
And I think quite a number of people, because after COVID we had all the quiet quitting and this big resignation, because a lot of people thought, shit, there's things that are more important in the world, and I've actually discovered it during COVID. But then what happened? Somebody came along and shut the door again, shut the lid on it again. So you had to, oh no, you've got to come back to work. Oh no, you've got to come back to travel in the city. And so the fallout from all that was certainly in Europe, huge swathes of people who were now in burnout.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The big crisis of mental health that has come as a result of COVID.
Yeah. And the other huge toll that, people talk about maybe privately here and there, but I don't know if they talk about it, like understanding that it's like a huge movement that happened through us, but the polarization of so many of our relationships because of all of their, different opinions on how COVID started, or whether you get a vaccine, and whether you're going to shun your relatives because somebody got a jab and you didn't, and it was so charged, and in some cases radicalized. And gosh, like I spent so much of my energy just trying to preserve certain relationships. And that was quite an art as well. And I think it makes everybody in general sort of walk on eggshells with each other in many ways socially. A lot of people, a lot of groups that we considered to be sort of cohesive and safe before this period came along, and you realize, oh, you're a MAGA, oh, you're a this, or you're a that. Just killed a lot of community stuff because of that. So, yeah, we're in a really weird time, aren't we?
Okay, so I'd just like to thank everybody who stayed with us thus far. I'd like to restate that the purpose of the podcast, the reason we are here, is to create a space to help us and to help you move into action and to begin changing the world in 2026. We believe this action is about understanding our own agency, creating communities of consciousness from which we can come together make sense of where we are and what is possible from here, locally and through all our connections with life. I think this may be a good point for a natural break. Perhaps find a place where you can take a few relaxed breaths, let go of some of the tension could have been building hearing those stories. Maybe make a cup of tea, or just give yourself a little time to reflect. And I sincerely hope that talking about the time of lockdown and the aftermath of COVID was not too much for anybody listening out there. We'll see you in part 2 when you're ready. And before our listeners start to think, oh gosh, the world's a terrible place, that's not really where we are. And what we're trying to do on this podcast is really explore, externalize, share, get past, compost all of that and realize that the separation it created is artificial. We're not really separated.
Yeah.
It's all about connection, the way forward, the way out.
Yeah.
Some people would say the way through. There's not a way out, there's a way through. And it's about connection. And, we're not the only people doing it, but this podcast is about that sharing in the connection, the third space. Because if there's one thing that COVID has accelerated, it's accelerated, as you say, the polarities and the extremes. So people are more individual, they're more separated, they're more alone than they ever were before. And the disparity of wealth and non-wealth, the cost of living crisis is as bad as it's ever been. So many people feel they can't reach across that or achieve, etc., crisis in belief. And for me, my hope for the show is that we realize the agency that we have together.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, I hope for the show too would be just like, I tend to name the thing that people are having trouble naming, that's, and that's why I'll bring up stuff that sounds difficult or intense or sad or whatever it is, because someone has to step out and name it so other people can feel safe to talk about it. And then that gets people processing it. So I would hope in the podcast that we create like a safe space for people to share things that they haven't been able to. But then we take it into what are we going to do, into the proactive.
Yeah. And to be candid, I mean, for the longest time now, I've been thinking, like I know many other people do, because I listen to lots of other podcasts, and the question that's uppermost for a lot of people is, well, what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I'm just one person.
I can't do anything on my own, and I'm just one person. And this individual survival mode is the very thing, ironically, and it's been talked about for decades. This individual survival mode is the way in which people are controlled. It's the way in which people who have wealth and power actually control what's going on. As soon as you're prepared to step out of but I can't do anything. As soon as you start to actually connect with others, do anything, whether it's locally, whatever, and we're going to cover that in this podcast over the weeks, then you start to regain that agency. And I just want to say to our listeners, I'm in exactly the same position. I'm no different to any of them. I'm looking to answer the same questions. Yeah. Same with our guests that come on, to find things for people to get involved with and really get moving in 2026.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm a big, I haven't shared this before maybe, but in 2004, I went back to school and I did a graduate diploma in community economic development. And previous to that, I was part of this, at Concordia University, we used to have called it University of the Streets. And then they would have, basically a bunch of activists from all across Canada come out to Concordia once a year and talk about change for a week, in different workshops and different traditions. And I really wanted to go back to school at that time because I wanted to meet people that were walking their talk, and see what I could learn. And it gave me my own philosophy of how change happens. Because, our professors were very like 1960s and protest and fight the man and all that. But we were in a different time. And so a lot of what I came to realize was one person changes the world like a raindrop and the rings in the water. You change yourself. That's why a lot of people are so afraid of change. You change yourself, and then everyone around you will have to reflect that or adjust to that. And so you have an enormous amount of agency if you work on yourself, or you express something that has been harder to say, or you set an example, you do an act, do an act of kindness. So I think people have to just understand, you don't have to be the one that, shuts down Amazon all by yourself or something, or you're not going to topple a government by yourself, but you can still do an awful lot as an individual.
Yeah. What that brings to mind for me is that we have this model often in our heads that just perhaps with this small number of connections we have, we're not going to be able to change anything. But I think it was Margaret Wheatley who said, actually, the model that you should have is a spider web. Now, if something comes onto a spider web, the whole web vibrates.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you imagine that you start to change in your interactions with people, then of course what happens is that web of interactions vibrates, but it doesn't just vibrate to the people who you are connected with. It vibrates to all of the people you're connected with.
Yes. Well, this is one of my core beliefs, and I based my business name on that, is the truth that we are all interconnected, whether you want to believe it or not. Because, one guy leaves his garbage out on the sidewalk and doesn't take care of it for a week. We all know. There's an impact. There's animals, there's other people who have to deal with your mess. And that's just one little action that you think, oh, it's nothing, it's just my stuff. But no. And same with your mood. You walk into a room, we all know people that walk into a room and darken it, and people walk into a room and brighten it, and that's one person's energy that came in and changed the field. And, to me, that's just a truth. If people could understand or really believe that, then they would go, oh, okay, I do count, and therefore what I'm doing is even if it's small, can still make a difference. No?
Okay. Well, that was quite a long and in-depth discussion that we had there. I have to say that every podcast will not be like that. That we felt today with the launch, it was good for our listeners to get a feel for what the subjects are, where we're coming from, what areas we might be covering, and, well, just what is the point of what we're talking about. But that was still a lot. So thank you very much for bearing with us. In future, instead of us, you'll be hearing from guests. So we have a set of guests lined up, and we want to hear from them. Where are they in all this? What effects has it had on them? What do they see for the future in 2026? Have some new ideas, some fresh insights on what is possible. So we'll be asking questions, and today we thought, because there's only us, we'll choose two of those questions and ask each other one question to take us towards the end of the show. Catharine, what would you like to ask me?
All right, Ray, so your question today is, what kinds of spaces make you feel the most sane and creative and productive these days?
There's only one answer for that. I tend to walk 3, 4, 5 times a week. I have 2 or 3 paths through some woodland that's not too far away from me. I have been a keen bird watcher, walked in nature since I was a child. So I have the eyes and the ears to see things, but it's not so much about just seeing or hearing them. It's being connected to something that's more alive. You know, we can get into our heads and we can get into all these ideas and fantasies about ourselves. But if you put your feet on the ground, somebody once said, I'm going to put my feet on the ground and I'm going to walk and I'm going to say to God, I'm here. Now, I'm not a Christian, but I understand completely the whole idea of getting your feet on the ground and connecting to everything. The energy of trees, the whole, without trees, we're nothing. So for me, to answer your question, spaces with life like that, that's when I'm most sane, most creative, most connected.
And do you have a question for me?
I do, Catherine.
All right.
Where do you most feel alive? Do you most feel alive?
Well, yeah. When do I most feel alive is 100% when I'm creating stuff. And I've always done lots of arts in my life. And I had a woman help me so much to heal during that time, that post-COVID year that we're talking about where we met. We used to get together once a week and just do art. And it had been a long time since I'd done any. And so, of course, the old perfectionist kicks in, right? And she really taught me the value of just being playful again. And so, yeah, I'd go and collect different flowers and I was hammering them onto fabrics and printing them onto fabrics and just seeing what worked. But it was that act of being creative and playful. And that eventually has led me to, Christmas of 2024, I saw somewhere online, I forget where, was it maybe in the US or I don't know. Somebody was doing like a community advent calendar where people would decorate their houses. And I live in a small walkable village by the water here. And I thought that is perfect for us. So I launched the idea and now it's in the second year and now the city's offering to help me expand it. But basically it's a living advent calendar and I just got people to, locals and businesses to decorate their homes, whether it's fancy, whether it's just one window. And then I'd give them a number and then they were on a map. And what happened was beautiful because businesses started to give free offerings on their day or bring events around their day. Residents were hosting little Sankaset or gathering on their porch in the middle of winter. It sparked a little healthy competition. And now it's going to turn into something even more, maybe even a little more formal with the city and drawing, because it's winter and we're a tourism village. I'm always coming from that mindset too. So there's the playfulness of decorating. There's the meeting your neighbors, and connecting. And then there's also the economic side of like bringing people to our village in winter because we could be a little cute Christmas destination because it really does look like a little Hallmark card out here.
So just for our listeners, the way I make this up, you have an idea based on creativity. Sounds a bit kooky to me. Advent calendar using people's houses and doors, but at the same time, sounds pretty cool. So I'm making up that in fact, probably there was a little bit of, incredulity on people. They maybe thought, what the heck's going on here? But little by little, that sort of snowballed and people got into it and actually started to enjoy it together.
Yeah, well, I mean, thankfully, since it's Advent, it's 24 days. It's not just one day, So people would start to see my little red numbers taped on the door and the windows of houses or businesses. And I'm sure some people still don't know what the hell's going on. It's been 2 years. But I filled the calendar. And then this year, I almost doubled it. And I helped, I talked to some of the businesses that really understood the value of what this could be. So one guy brought in a Santa Claus and a professional photographer, and he showed up wearing a Santa suit and brought food from his restaurant to one of my other events. And I mean, people just really have a good community spirit out here. Like, not everyone, but there's a number of us that were, especially pre-pandemic, very active and care a lot about community and creativity. So I'm lucky to live in a place like this where I could just organically do that, and it worked. You know, I know so many more people now because of this, and they know me, and I know everyone's dogs and everyone's everything. And, you know, I'm trying to encourage other people to, if they liked it or they want more, to, well, think of something you want to do. Like, not everything has to be run by one person or waiting for the city to do everything for us, you know?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was fun.
I'm struck by the fact that we often think large change, global change, but change actually takes place locally between people, between groups, between communities. It's as we've already talked about earlier. Well,
even in this little town, you know, in every little town, there's still politics and there's still resistance everywhere, no matter where. And we do have, you know, a city, and we have a merchants association, and I would get advice from people that I really should go through those channels and should send emails and talk and get consensus with everyone. And that is the typical old way to do things. And I told everybody, no, because if I sit around lobbying everybody for consensus, nothing will start. So I just did it. And I said, it's more like if you build it, they will come. So I was having fun. I did it. I found other people who found it fun. And now it's growing because of that. And if people say, oh, how come? I'm like, you can join too then. Come on along. And all I do is make sure that doesn't turn into a big show of money and a big competition factor. You know, I reassured everybody, I don't care how big or small this is. I'd like to see many numbers on the windows so people walk around and feel like they're walking around a little guided tour, or it feels like we're living in an advent calendar for a few days with all the lights.
Perfect. But as we come to the end of the show,
yes,
and before you take us there, it perfectly illustrates some of the themes that we will be constantly coming back to on the show. Disconnection into belonging. Actually, okay, we might have a sense of collapse, but we can creatively respond to that collapse. We can share, make sense of it, create new spaces, and we can still dream. Yeah, still imagine, and we can still create things.
Yes, just as real as all the heavy, nasty collapse stuff is, beauty and art are still there.
Yes.
Love is still there. It's all part of the same world. We're just it's what you focus on, right? That grows, I think. All right, so I want to just thank you, Ray, for this amazing thing that you did, reaching across the miles, across the Atlantic to start these conversations, because they've been very uplifting and enriching conversations that have organically led to where we are now, having this podcast. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And just to recap, you know, we have many themes on the show. We're going to have guests, we're going to have interviews, but I do want to bring it back to the context of this upcoming important year of the Fire Horse, and just put a final question out to you as the audience. What do you feel ready to act on for yourself this year? I want to thank everybody for joining us, and stay tuned.
Thank you, Catharine. I look forward to hearing it. Till next time.
Till next time.
Well, thanks again to all of our listeners and those involved in creating this show, the first podcast in this series. I hope you enjoyed it. I don't know how you come to be listening, but if you wish to find us and find out more, you can find links to our Substack space, YouTube, and other sites for the podcast in the show notes. I'd like to be clear about what we're doing here. It's to create communities around what is still possible, despite the collapse and the separation. And a big shout out and appreciation for Fold, the creatives who allowed us to use their music in the background of the show and this piece I am now talking over. I found much inspiration in what they are doing. They're a music collective from Leeds who, in their words, believe that the answers to a sustainable future lie in prioritising the value of life over profits in all our decisions. Thanks again to Fold. Go and check them out. You can find them on SoundCloud, and I'm sure other places as well. Well, that's about it. A year in the making, but this shared adventure is launched. I hope to see you soon, and I hope most of all that we can help each other to discover and create a different future in this, the year of the Fire Horse.